Okay, so this is the Bible study for 2 Samuel chapter 20. And the text says, Now a troublemaker named Sheba, son of Bichri, a Benjamite, happened to be there. He sounded the trumpet and shouted, We have no share in David, no part in Jesse's son. Every man to his tent, Israel. So all the men of Israel deserted David to follow Sheba, son of Bichri. But the men of Judah stayed by their king all the way from the Jordan to Jerusalem. When David returned to his palace in Jerusalem, he took the 10 concubines he had left to take care of the palace and put them in a house under guard. He provided for them, but had no sexual relations with them. They were kept in confinement till the day of their death, living as widows. Then the king said to Amasa, Summon the men of Judah to come to me within 3 days, and be there yourself. But when Amasa went to summon Judah, he took longer than the time the king had set for him. David said to Abishai, Now Sheba, son of Bichri, will do us more harm than Absalom did. Take your master's men and pursue him, or he will find fortified cities and escape from us. So Joab's men and the Kerethites and Pelethites and all the mighty warriors went out under the command of Abishai. They marched out from Jerusalem to pursue Sheba, son of Bichri. While they were at the great rock in Gibeon, Amasa came to meet them. Joab was wearing his military tunic, and strapped over it at his waist was a belt with a dagger in its sheath. As he stepped forward, it dropped out of his sheath. Joab said to Amasa, How are you, my brother? Then Joab took Amasa by the beard with his right hand to kiss him. Amasa was not on his guard against the dagger in Joab's hand, and Joab plunged it into his belly, and his intestines spilled out on the ground. Without being stabbed again, Amasa died. Then Joab and his brother Abishai pursued Sheba, son of Bichri. One of Joab's men stood beside Amasa and said, Whoever favors Joab and whoever is for David, let him follow Joab. Amasa lay wallowing in his blood in the middle of the road. When the man saw that all the troops came to a halt there, when he realized that everyone who came up to Amasa stopped, he dragged him from the road into the field and threw a garment over him. After Amasa had been removed from the road, everyone went on with Joab to pursue Sheba, son of Bichri. Sheba passed through all the tribes of Israel to Abel-Beth-Maachah, and through the entire region of the Bichrites, who gathered together and followed him. All the troops with Joab came and besieged Sheba in Abel-Beth-Maachah. They built a siege ramp up to the city, and it stood against the outer fortifications. While they were battering the wall to bring it down, a wise woman called from the city, Listen, listen, tell Joab to come here so I can speak to him. He went toward her, and she asked, Are you Joab? I am, he answered. She said, Listen to what your servant has to say. I'm listening, he said. She continued, Long ago, they used to say, Get your answer at Abel. And that settled it. We are the peaceful and faithful in Israel. You are trying to destroy a city that is a mother in Israel. Why do you want to swallow up the Lord's inheritance? Far be it from me, Joab replied. Far be it from me to swallow up or destroy. This is not the case. A man named Sheba, son of Bichri from the hill country of Ephraim, has lifted up his hand against the king, against David. Hand over this one man, and I'll withdraw from the city. The woman said to Joab, His head will be thrown to you from the wall. Then the woman went to all the people with her wise advice, and they cut off the head of Sheba, son of Bichri, and threw it to Joab. So he sounded the trumpet, and his men dispersed from the city, each returning to his home. And Joab went back to the king in Jerusalem. Joab was over Israelites and Israel's entire army. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, was over the Kerethites and Pelethites. Adoniram, was in charge of forced labor. Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, was recorder. Shiva was secretary. Zadok and Abiathar were priests. And Ira the Jerethite was David's priest. Okay, so remember that you can download PDF copies of this Bible study at www.abqnaz.org/alive so that you can follow along with us. And this is a relatively long text, and kind of building on where we finished last week's Bible study. Number 1 says, what happened in our text last week? A, people in Israel were saying, why haven't we brought David back? He saved us from the Philistines, and now we don't have a king. That's true. B, David sent a message to Judah saying, why haven't you brought me back, my own family, when everybody else is talking about it? That's true. C, Judah came out to meet David at the Jordan, and everybody who had a strained relationship with David showed up too. That should be 2 TOO. Even Shimei with 1,000 Benjamites. And that's true. D, Israel and Judah started arguing about who should be able to bring David back. And that's true. And that's kind of how we ended the text in the Bible study. Number 2, what do we learn in 21 and 2? A troublemaker came too. Why does there always have to be one of those around? So it tells us a troublemaker named Sheba, son of Bichri. Now, he was a Benjamite, which was, we don't know if he came with the rest of Israel or if he came with the 1,000 Benjamites that came with Shimei. It seems like if he had come with Shimei, that these 1,000 Benjamites were there to help bring David back, and that if Shimei brought him, Shimei was repenting. And so maybe this was a rogue that didn't come with the same heart as Shimei, but maybe he came out with the rest of Israel and not really with that group. It doesn't really tell us. All we know is that he was a Benjamite, and maybe I've assumed some things about the Benjamites that came out with Shimei, that they had a similar heart or thinking, but it's hard to tell. B, it seems like after the argument, Sheba decided to throw a little fit and convince all Israel to abandon David. So what's interesting is it doesn't say that when this guy Sheba threw a fit that the Benjamites deserted David. It says Israel, all the men of Israel. It does say, but the men of Judah stayed. So I don't know if the Benjamites headed out with them, with the rest of Israel, or, it had seemed like the Benjamites were bringing him back with Judah, and that the Israelites came out, the rest of the Israelites came out. It's hard because they're all Israelites. They're all from Israel, but it distinguishes them here. And really, this is one of the earlier places where it starts to distinguish. Obviously, when the kingdom is divided, it always distinguishes between the two kingdoms, and it uses names that refer to, like Judah is one tribe when it really means the kingdom of Judah and not the tribe of Judah, in those later passages. So it's kind of difficult to tell what it's referring to sometimes when it starts referring to multiple tribes by one name. So anyway, B, we already said this. It seems like after the argument, Sheba decided to throw a little fit. So there was already arguing and selfishness. He probably felt this way too, but he found a opportunity to use this as an opportunity to rebel and to take leadership of a bunch of Israel's troops and people, and lead them sort of against the king. And really, he says, I'm taking my people and I'm going home, is what he says. And he takes off and leaves. We're not, if we can't be the ones that bring David in, the king back, then we're not going to be a part of his kingdom anyway. And, we'll just go home. So the last part says, do we still act this way today when our pride is hurt and we don't get our way? And unfortunately, too often the answer is yes. You can answer for yourself. I can say on earth, in our culture, in this country, yes, absolutely, we still do. I could even probably say in the church, amongst the people that are supposed to not behave this way, yes, sometimes we still do. But the question is, when you're answering for yourself, and my guess is if you say, no, I never do that, then you're probably not being realistic and really looking at your situation, because at very least you're tempted to. I hope we don't always fall into temptation to do that, but I know that we're tempted, and I know that too often we do fall into that temptation. Number three, what happened then in 23? It says, when David returned to his palace in Jerusalem, he took the 10 concubines he had left to take care of the palace and put them in his house under guard, or in a house under guard. He provided for them, but he had no sexual relations with them. They were kept in confinement till the day of their death, living as widows. So these are the ones that Absalom had slept with on the roof in front of all Israel, to basically show his dominance. And I know that in our current culture, it's unthinkable for us to, I think we've talked about this before. It's unthinkable for us to, what it seems like, hold them responsible, is what it seems like he's doing. So they're being punished at some level, is what it looks like. Now, that is not the intent. This is not intended to be a punishment for them, but I think in our current cultural climate, it would feel that way. It would feel definitely very not fair to them. But given the way the law was written, about being monogamous, keeping ourselves only unto one person, the law also actually says, if you come together with a woman and then you're separated or divorced, it says, and then they go out with somebody else, or they sleep with someone else, and then you come back, you're not supposed to come back together. That's actually written in scripture. And so it's interesting, because God, and all of this is because God's intent is for us to have one partner for life. And obviously if that partner dies, then there are allowances for what is supposed to happen then. But this was intended, the law was intended against promiscuity, against basically what's happening right now that's common in our culture, is just sleeping with whoever, whenever, back and forth. That it was supposed to stop that. Now, unfortunately, in a culture where women in general did not have a say in what was going on nearly as much as we know that they should, this wasn't considered as problematic as we do when we read it. But in the end, what David is doing is following the law and keeping himself pure. Now, we can argue, how is he keeping himself pure when he had so many wives and concubines anyway? But he was attempting to follow the law, and not, he was in a relationship with each of these ladies, and Absalom slept with them, and he wasn't coming back together. Now, I think obviously this is a lot more one-sided and male-dominated than we would apply these things, because they can only, he's not going to come back together with them after they've slept with another guy, and yet he's got multiple women, right? This is a challenge to our understanding. But in his mind, he's trying to follow the law in doing this, and that's why this is significant. They've There's also, I think, some degree where, you know, this, there's, they have come together with his son. I mean, there's just something wrong about all that, right? And so he's just, he still fed them, he still took care of them, but he no longer slept with them. And oh well, there it is. Number 4, what happened in chapter 20, verses 4 through 13? A, David sent Amasa to summon the men of Judah to come to him within 3 days. He needed to take care of the Sheba problem. So he says, Amasa, go get everybody, bring them to me in 3 days. You come to me too. B, Amasa took longer than the time the king had set for him. So remember this, that the entire way that the battle with Absalom was foiled by Absalom's planning and decision. Remember the frustration of the advice of this king, or of this person who had given godly advice all the time before, and instead Absalom followed the advice of this person that was kind of a plant intentionally to give bad advice. And the difference between those two advice, the good advice was go quick with a small group as fast as you can and pursue David. But what they did instead was waited for all of Israel to come. So by that time, David was rested, David was fed, and his troops. And so Absalom's people were defeated. Absalom's men were defeated. So now David is setting a time period. We're going to go after Sheba. We're going to go after him quick. Go summon the troops, and then within 3 days. And when Amasa didn't come back within 3 days, David sent Abishai, and apparently Joab was with them. Was Joab's troops under the command of Abishai, and then Joab is obviously there. C, David decided to move forward before Amasa had returned because he was concerned that Sheba would do more harm than Absalom did. He sent Joab's men and the Kerethites and Pelethites out under the command of Abishai to pursue Sheba. So, okay, he didn't come back. We've got a small group of troops here. We're gonna send them under Joab and Abishai. D, Amasa met the army at the great rock in Gibeon, and Joab pretended to pull him in for a brotherly kiss, but stabbed him instead and killed him. So, you know, Amasa just got given his job, but then, of course, when Amasa didn't come back, Joab was sent out anyway with a smaller group. And so I'm sure there was, this is not out of the character of Joab, right? This is, remember what he did to Abner. And we can say, well, maybe he was a warrior or whatever, but he had a way of maintaining his position. And so he pulled Amasa in like he was going to kiss him like a brother, and then he stabbed him and killed him. E, when they went to move on, everyone kept stopping when they came to Amasa, so Joab removed him from the road, and the army continued to pursue Sheba. So, you know, probably not everybody in the army saw this happen. The troops at the back didn't see it, but when they came to him, they stopped in front of him, who was supposed to be their commander now, right? And so Joab had to pull him out of the way and cover him up so people would quit stopping, and then they all followed Joab and pursued Sheba. Next part of the question says, what happened to the David that left Jerusalem thinking that maybe it was the will of God moving against him? So the point of this part of the question is, hey, so now David sends, we're going to attack Sheba. Sheba's worse than Absalom. He's going to do more damage to us than Absalom. We're going to strike him down fast. This is not the same David, or at least not the same behavior in David that we saw when he was saying, well, we're just going to leave. We're not going to destroy the city. We're not going to have war with our own family. Well, maybe it was because Absalom was in his family that this is different. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's because he learned something. Maybe it's because he's now confident that God has brought him back, whereas before he knew it could be God's judgment on him because of his sin. But now he's confident that God has brought him back, and therefore God has him as king. So now he's responding differently to maintain the throne, knowing that God has brought him back. It's really hard to say, but it definitely seems like different behavior. And we're not talking about Joab's actions, because that's Joab. The last part of this question says, what do we learn about Joab in this? Or maybe we already knew. Joab is ruthless. Joab will do what it takes to maintain his position and his power in the military. And Joab is a strong military presence. And Joab is not afraid to kill. And there are many cases where Joab is the exact right person to have in control of the military for David. And then there are many situations we see in which Joab does the thing that doesn't represent David's leadership. And so we see that again here, I think. Number 5, what happened in chapter 20, verses 14 through 22? A, Joab and his troops besieged Sheba, and they built a siege ramp and began battering the wall to bring it down. That's true. B, a wise woman called from the city and asked for Joab to come to her. This is a wise woman. We don't know what that means. We've heard this wise woman before. Apparently wise enough to call over the city wall and ask for the commander and strike a treaty here, make an agreement, find out what needs to be done for them to not destroy the city. But we know that she says long ago they used to say, get your answer at Abel. So we know this is a town that has apparently somebody or somebodies who speak the word of God, that if you go to Abel and ask what that you should do, you're going to get your answer. And so perhaps she was one of the leaders of this city, or one of the leaders of this group of people that give the answers that God would have his people know. But she says, look, this is a treasure in Israel. Why are you attacking us? And she called down from the city wall. C, the woman asked Joab why they are trying to destroy a city that is peaceful and faithful and used to be a place where people came to get answers or wisdom. That's true. That's what she asked. D, Joab responded by saying he did not want to destroy the city, but Sheba had lifted his hand against the king. He asked them to hand him over and they would withdraw. So he says, look, we don't have any beef with this city. It's not about the city. The city may be great. The city may be peaceful and faithful and a place to get answers. But Sheba raised his hand against the king. Sheba led the men of Israel away from the king instead of supporting the king and bringing him back in. So Sheba has to be dealt with. You hand over Sheba, and this all goes away. We don't attack you anymore. We won't bring down the wall. The woman promised that Sheba's head would be thrown to him over the wall, and that's what happened. She says, oh, that's what you want? We can give you that. So inside the city, they took off Sheba's head and tossed it over the wall. He's dead. You don't need to attack us anymore. We're going to save this whole city. We're going to save our infrastructure. We're going to save our people. We're not at war with you. And to prove that, the person you're looking for, we're going to kill him and send his head over so you know it's already done. And so that's an interesting turn of events. Number 6 says, how does this all fit what we know about David? Well, David's a strong king. David does what is right. David, in this instance, dealt with Sheba and felt like that was the right thing to do. I'm not sure what Joab did had anything to do with David. But I think David establishing himself and not allowing anybody to take the kingdom from him now that he knows that God would have him be back, is a very important thought. And so he's strong. He's not a weak king. He may act with grace. He may sometimes not destroy when he could have destroyed, not pursue when he could have pursued, not fought when he could have fought, but he is still strong. He's still able to fight when he feels like it's appropriate and needed. But what Joab did with Amasa, I don't believe that was David at all. That was Joab going outside of David's instructions, and making sure he secured his position. And so I don't know that we need to attribute that to David or put the guilt of that on David.